And my last but not least guest has been waiting for a very long time. He's from Brazil, and he will discuss all these major political changes in Latin America and the Caribbean. So his name is Marco Fernandez. He's the researcher with Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. So Marco, welcome. How are you? Are you tired for waiting so long?
No, I was enjoying so much the show. My God. Oh, having fun. No worries.
Okay, so I know you're in São Paulo right now, right, in Brazil. So I know you have some big events to attend. So tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, let me apologize because I'm not wearing red. I'm saving my red shirt to Lula's inauguration on Sunday. So.
Okay, I can forgive that.
But yes, we are super excited. Of course, this is like 48 hours more or less now for Lula's inauguration. This is a major political event in Brazil. I would say it's even, I think, more important than 20 years ago when Lula was elected for the first time, because now it's a very different situation. We lived like 6 years of a big nightmare, being ruled by the right wing and extreme right wing. The country is absolutely devastated. It's more than 30 million people suffering with hunger now. We never had this situation. And more than 120 million people live some sort of food insecurity right now. So first, like, urgent task of Lula, of course, will be to tackle this issue of, again, poverty. And I would say Brazil should learn some of the lessons of the poverty alleviation, the target poverty alleviation campaign from China. I'm sure they will. And the second big task, I would say, is to reindustrialize the country. Brazil had, in the last 20 years, a very bad performance in terms of manufacturing. Just for one example, in 2000, the most exported product from Brazil was air jets that Embraer, the SOE Embraer used to manufacture. Well, now we export soy. It's our main product. So this already shows you the regression of the Brazilian economy. And I would say there's no other country in the world right now with more financial and technological capacity to support this urgent task of Brazil than China. Brazil needs transfer of technology in sectors like energy, like in EVs, 5Gs, biotechnology. For all of that, China could play a big role. And guess what? For instance, we're talking so much about the jealous ex-partner, right? So imagine that for Brazil, of course, I mean, as I was saying, transfer of technology is a key issue for the next decades. And guess what? The U.S. Congress forbids U.S. companies to transfer technology. So even if maybe the president of the United States trying to have like a friendly move to countries in the global south, U.S. Congress will not allow. So of course, I mean, this is one more reason why so many countries in the global south are doing agreements with China. I mean, your invitee, Mr. Hussein, just remind us of the great agreements that the Gulf countries, right, did with China recently, in terms, for instance, of industrialization of the oil or space cooperation. These kind of things that not only Brazil, the whole Latin America needs that. Just give one example, for instance, Latin America has more than 90% of the global reserves of lithium. So imagine the potential of a partnership with China to process this lithium in Latin America instead of just export the raw material especially for China. So this is the kind of dialogue that Latin America and going back to Brazil, that Brazil needs this higher level discussion. And of course, I mean, the whole world is waiting for Lula and Xi's first meeting, which was already announced for the first quarter of the next year. So we're also very excited And I think the Chinese are also very excited. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but China is coming with 40 people delegation, including the vice president of China, Wang Qisha. And you showed me the beautiful gift that China is bringing to President Lula. So that's going to be a very, I think that's going to be, the potential of the partnership between Brazil and China is not only good for Brazil and China, is good for the whole global South. Remember that Brazil and China were the key drivers of the formation of the BRICS in 2009, especially a few years after the foundation when they decided to establish the new development bank in Shanghai and the BRICS Bank, they call it BRICS Bank, and the Contingent Reserves Agreement, which is a sort of alternative to the IMF, a fund. So yeah, I think there's a big, but that's why I'm saving my red shirt to Sunday, so I can both pay our respect to Lula and the Chinese delegation in Brazil.
Understandable. Okay. I think it sounds like you think the future for China-Brazil relations and China and Latin America relations in the future, not just in 2023, in the future will be very promising. Do you think so? But I know I've been reading the news, but there are some conflicts trying to create chaos for the inauguration for Lula in Brazil. So I'm wondering, do you think the future will be less turbulent, prosperous for the whole Latin America?
Well, that's, I think, $1 billion question because, as we know, I mean, in many countries of Latin America, we suffer from chaos and political turbulences from time to time. And guess what? I mean, most of the times, of course, U.S. is involved. Like just now in Peru, we just had a coup against President Castillo, who was elected by the people. Yeah, it was a very narrow victory, as most of the elections. Actually, this is one of the trends in Latin America in the last years. Even when the left is winning again, it's a very narrow victory. Even Lula won by like 1 point something percent, 2 million votes in more than 100 million. So, but President Castillo, for instance, now there's been already reports about the, first of all, the influence of the U.S. ambassador, which, by the way, coincidentally is an ex-CIA agent. Imagine the kind of friendly person. But guess what? Let me bring you back what Lula said. President Lula said last year, actually, when he gave an interview to Guancha. It was a very famous interview in China and also in Brazil. So I just want to quote a few lines from President Lula. This is actually the end of the interview. He said something like that. It's great to see China take a significant place in the world economy and to see China take a place in the world geopolitics. That's what I want for China. That's what I want for Brazil, for South Africa, Nigeria, Argentina, and Mexico. Latin America can be born poor, and it should not be natural that every time a country in Latin America starts to grow, there is a coup. And it's unacceptable that in every coup, people from United States and U.S. ambassador would be involved. This is from President Lula, which, by the way, spent 2 years in jail because of false accusations of corruption that are already demonstrated by many documents how much U.S. Justice Department of U.S. and the FBI were directly involved in this conspiration to put Lula in jail. So he knows all the dangers that the extreme right wing will still represent in Brazil. I mean, guess where Bolsonaro is going tomorrow? Instead of being in the inauguration, he's not going to do the protocol and all the rituals, etc. He's flying to spend the week in Mar-a-Lago in Donald Trump's mansion. So this is what our extreme right wing looks like. I mean, they don't even hide their direct relations and with the United States and etc. So that's a big challenge for Lula, for sure.
You know, like after our live stream entered to now, like 3 hours almost, We went through all the major geopolitics in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, now Latin America. We see some common elements in this. It's the U.S. interventions, all these Western-sponsored coups. It takes place in every continent, in every region. It's why would
Absolutely.
you?
I mean,
yeah,
you
go
know,
on.
we have a famous joke here in Latin America. You say, you know, why it's impossible to have to happen a coup d'état in United States? Because there's no U.S. embassy there. So that's the reality of the global South. We've been dealing with that in the last 100 years at least. But you know what? I mean, I think all your guests made very, very accurate comments about the situation in their regions and how much, no matter what, U.S. it is losing some of its hegemony. Of course, they are still the big power. They are the empire. We cannot underestimate them. But you know, we should remember the classic book of Mao Zedong, The Protected War, which he wrote in the 30s about the war against the aggression, the resistance of the Chinese people against the Japanese aggression. He said, you know, we cannot underestimate our enemy, but we can also not overestimate our enemy. I think this is the situation we are now. And by the way, it's interesting how much this book it's again a bestseller in China in the last years, right? So I think shows I think is a bit of the current political situation. But let me give you one example of this year, since we're doing a recap of 2022. Remember what happened in the America Summit? Remember what happened? That was the biggest diplomatic failure of United States in the last decades in Latin America. They decided to uninvite Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, which they consider not democracies, so they should not be in the summit. But we saw a major reaction. I would say even unexpected reaction for most of us at the beginning. Countries led by Mexico, President López Obrador, and also joined by Alberto Fernandez from Argentina, they led a boycott. And at the end of the day, 12 out of 35 countries didn't show up. I mean, the presidents, and even Argentina president, he went there just to criticize United States in the behalf of CELAC, because he was representing CELAC. So I think this is a very good sign about the current political situation in the continent and how much many of the countries in our region, they are not going to just put their heads down and be subservient to U.S. Anymore. And I would say also right after that summit, U.S. also suffered a huge blow in the region, which was the election in Colombia of President Gustavo Petro, which is the first time ever Colombia has a leftist president. And wow, by the way, Colombia, if there's one country which was really the U.S. backyard, was Colombia. Colombia had, for instance, has seven U.S. military bases inside the country. Is extreme violent country. For instance, more than 2,000 activists from social movements were murdered in the last 6 years. And of course, the relations with United States, everybody in the region know how much Colombia government was like side by side with the U.S. in many of the operations in the region. And Colombia is even like a special member or special partner of NATO in the region. So that gives you a sign of what is the meaning of Colombia electing now a leftist president. What is the meaning for the U.S.? So we also expect that President Petro will be joining hands with Mexico, Argentina, and now Lula and now Brazil to reestablish CELAC, which was sort of not meetings from 2019 to 2021, since actually Brazil left, since Bolsonaro left CELAC, but now CELAC is reconvening. And we expect from the next year that Brazil is going back, By the way, Brazil already announced that it's going to reestablish UNASUR, which is the South American platform. And of course, Brazil is going back to BRICS at full steam from next week. So we're expecting a very exciting year, I would say, a very challenging year also for Latin America because of the global situation, economic crisis, food and energy crisis. Of course, there's a big challenge for our governments to deal with poverty and these issues for most of the population. But at the same time, it's sort of like a window of opportunities being opened this year again, especially with Lula being back to Brasilia, to the presidency of the country.
And you know what? To now, we have been doing this live stream for almost 3 hours now, and we talk about all these major events in every continent. But you may think we are just here to say good things about China, but actually no. If you hear all these guests, what they are saying, it's not about what the United States wants. It's not about what China wants. It's about what people in this region want. It's about what the countries in the global South want. And like just like you mentioned in about the Summit of Americas, like countries in Latin America, they are looking for regional development. They're looking for independence without being dominated, being lectured by the United States. And the same for many countries in Africa, in Southeast Asia. So we are seeing these major geopolitical shifts, not necessarily because of China is rising, but because of every region is looking for a development, looking for independence. So they are looking for what's in the best interests for them. So they are tired of being told, being lectured, being bullied and dominated, being exploited by the US-led West. And they are working with China, and they are choosing China probably because China is rising economically, and also China doesn't interfere with their internal affairs. China, from the government, they are showing the respect to all these governments. They don't care what system you are or what's going on domestically. We'll work with you to look for mutual interests. So I think that's important for guests from around the world to understand. It's like we're really, aside from this so-called competition between China or United States, the major geopolitical shifts actually come from those people, the people in those regions, the global South. They want to change. They are looking for a new development method. They are looking for independence. What do you think? Do you agree with me, Marco?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you one example about the economic relationship between China and Latin America. I think the last 20 years, they were outstanding in terms of the progress that were made. For instance, like the trade between China and Latin America jumped from $15 billion in 2001 to $451 billion in 2021. And in terms of the balanced trade, is very balanced, actually. China has a surplus of just $6.5 billion. China received 27% of the total of exportation from Latin America, and 22% of all the imports to Latin America came from China. And finally, in terms of direct investment, China invested $158 billion in Latin America from 2005 to 2020. So, I mean, there's no doubts about the importance of the relationship between China and Latin America. But it's true that for the next 20 years, as I was mentioning before, we need to enter a new stage. Because right now, most, of course, of this trade is Latin America exporting commodities to China, soy, iron ore, lithium, oil, beef. By the way, Brazil is the biggest exporter of beef to China. By the way, is very good beef. And China, of course, exports manufactured products to Latin America. But the problem is that there's no there's no problem for Latin America to export natural resources to China because, I mean, China is responsible for almost 30% of the manufacturing of the world. Of course, China needs all these natural resources. But for Latin America itself, it's, for one side, is good for the economy in general, but the agribusiness sector, the mining sectors, they actually are, usually they're hyper concentrated business. They don't create so many jobs relatively. They have usually low salaries because it's like a low skill jobs. And most of the times they create big problems for the environment. And this is, of course, this is the Latin America government's task to deal with that and to control the damage. But as a whole, for the people of Latin America, only exportation of commodities, it's not the best deal for a long term. So that's why I was very interested on these last agreements with the Gulf countries, as Mr. Hossein just mentioned, because I think this gives us an example of what China is willing to do. Even like what they did with Argentina the last years, very good deals about energy, especially the one about nuclear energy, that China will not only fund a new nuclear power plant in Argentina, but will also transfer technology to Argentina. So that's the kind of deals that actually is expressed when President Xi Jinping read the report on the 20th National Congress, when he said that China is committed to narrow the gap between the development gap between South and North of the world. So I think China is saying this officially, but is already showing, like in Argentina case, in the Gulf countries case, and other countries already, what China is willing to do. So also it's our job as countries of the whole global South to propose better deals, better agreements with China. Of course, China is not going to do this for Brazil. I mean, Lula has to sit down with Xi Jinping and say, okay, comrade, we need a better deal. Can we do it? Let's do it. Let's work together. And it's clear that China is open for these new opportunities.
Let's work together for a shared future. So
Exactly.
this live stream has been going on longer, much longer than I expected. And even though I really enjoy this discussion with you, but I think we have to move a little bit quicker. So I also prepared this, this funny takes on Latin America for you. So you have 10 seconds to give a comments to each of this take, okay? Let's take a look at the first one. Let's rant. Oh, this is from my tweet.
Oh my God.
Okay, your comment?
Well, this is the kind of things that the right wing in Latin America and the US together does for the region. I mean, imagine that this guy, it's like a thug, is being running around the world saying, I am the Venezuela president without being elected by anyone, just because US now say so, or United European Union say so. It's so ridiculous. You know that there was a joke when Liz Truss, she left cabinet with like, I don't know, 40 days or something like that. It was like a British record. The day after she left cabinet, there was a meme with the Juan Guaido. I mean, for the ones who know, this is Juan Guaido.
Yeah.
There was a meme Guaido saying, wow, I'm applying to become next a British prime minister. This guy's a joke. This guy's a joke. He's a total joke.
To those of you who don't
you know
understand
what?
this, to those, this
you know
is
what? The situation is. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a brief introduction. To those of you who don't understand the background story about this is the Juan Guaido, the U.S. Sponsored president of Venezuela, and The Economist put him on his front cover, but he was beaten up by the locals. Now he's abandoned by its sponsors. So I mean, that's what you see. The sponsors that the Western media portray as a hero are deeply hated by the local people.
And it's so hypocritical because now that U.S. needs oil, more oil again because of the crisis in Ukraine. I mean, they just said that, oh, we recognize that Maduro is the president of Venezuela again. Because, of course, now they need oil. So this is ridiculous.
What a backstabbing at a Guaido. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Can you see the words clearly?
Yeah. My God. Yeah, I mean, how much? I mean, Haiti is Haiti is a tragic history because I mean Haiti is suffering still today for the fact that Haiti was the first nation in the whole region to become independent of European white colonization. In 1804, Black people organized a revolt and just like expelled the French out of Haiti, and since then Haiti is just being massacred with like so many coups and interventions, and especially of course from the U.S. in the last and then they even don't know, and that's the Black people, right? I mean, so it's a tragic situation. I think it's one of the probably the most tragic situation historically in our region of interventions from France to U.S.
Okay, let's take a look at the next one. The Economist again.
Yeah, I mean, if this cover were from 2016, they were right because this is when President Dilma Rousseff was impeached by a totally like a big fraud of the Congress. I mean, the Congress already recognized that she officially recognized she didn't do anything wrong. But that was I would say from 2013 to 2016, that was probably the most sophisticated hybrid war operation that U.S. ever led was against Brazil. Since the Snowden revelations, we know that President Dilma herself was hacked by the U.S., her cell phone, and Petrobras, the state oil company, who actually was the center of the corruption scandals, it was being heavily surveyed by NSA and CIA. So, how democracy decay, we know when U.S. starts to pull the strings in our countries. This is absolutely it's a common sense for most of the people in this region.
Thank you so much. And do we have another picture from Marco? The last one. Okay. Capitalism has never failed. Marco, what's your comment?
Yeah, from time to time in Latin America, I mean, we have this narrative that, we need a shock of capitalism, we need a shock of liberalism in our countries, because, the left spends too much, the left cares too much about the people, and we have to care about the business and the capital, etc., etc. So this is unfortunately, this is a constant struggle of our country. But the one thing that I think is very important to remind, and I was reading some analysis from Chinese think tanks these last few days. Very good analysis, actually, very interesting analysis. But one thing is missing from some of them is the role of imperialism. Because they just assume that the right wing goes back to power because the left doesn't really know how to run the economy, which is totally false. I mean, Brazilian economy was doing very great before all the this big conspiration against President Dilma started in 2013, and this happens to many other countries. Of course, I mean, they also make mistakes, absolutely. But you cannot understand these ups and downs between left and right wing in Latin America without the major role of U.S. colluding with the right wing in the countries and operating coups and etc. So yeah, this is important in our history, but we still have hope that we can change this one day, and January 1st, next Monday, is the next chapter for Brazil.
You know what? I got a comment on the live chat on YouTube. I think someone said, "You got to love Marco's sense of humor while talking about such serious topics. Great guest." And there are several people very active during the live chat on YouTube. Rudy Adrinson, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, I'm sorry. And Red Horizon, Harry C. Smith, and Ater Carr, Cosmo Ray, and Robert Richard. Thank you all for being so active in the comment section. And thank you so much, Marco. You've been waiting online for so long and spending so much time give us this in-depth analysis on Brazil and Latin America for so long. Thank you so much. Always happy to have you on this show. So looking forward to a bright future for Latin America, for Brazil, and also China-Brazil relations in 2023. So I'm going to say goodbye to you now and see you more in 2023.
Thank you very much, Linjing. It's a big pleasure to be here talking to you as always. And well, see you soon in Beijing in a few weeks. I'm coming back soon.
Okay, bye, Marco.